And I would like to welcome Andy Corts and Anthony Costello to the stage. Round of applause for Andy and Anthony. Awesome. I'm going to ask us to do one more thing. Stand up. There we go.
I have to get unhooked. Thank you.
Like I said, we're lucky to have some of the most talented research leaders from around the world. I also said on your toes. So stand up, stretch. Now sit down. Thank you. I felt very powerful in that moment. To conclude this morning's remarks, I think it's fitting that we have two of the most influential leaders from the site, sponsor, and digital ecosystem sides of our business. We started out today hearing from me and some of the Florence team. We heard from Dr. Califf about the global national picture. And now we're going to talk about getting shit done using technology. I'm lucky to have these two gentlemen. First, on our right is Anthony Costello. Anthony started his career in data management at Genentech in the 90s. So not only was he wearing neon green and yellow, but he was figuring out how to get data from one place to another at the beginning of the biotech revolution. He then built chips that you may have seen in your local 5K. I think this is such a cool left turn that your career took in making timing devices for when you're running road races. And then ultimately he founded Mitros, which was acquired by Medidata back in 2017 and rose through the ranks of Medidata to become CEO. And he may also have the distinction of rivaling me in being a bigger bike nerd than I am. What's the right number of bikes before you get divorced? I have 6. Is that the right number or is that the wrong number?
Well, when I got divorced, I was actually I was down to 3.
That's very
So I don't know if
responsible.
there's a correlation between those things.
More bikes better. So thanks for joining us, Anthony. Andy started his career like me and is now a recovering consultant. So one of my first jobs out of school was building PowerPoint slides at a high rate of speed. That's where Andy cut his teeth as well. He then rose to handle some of the thorniest IT and infrastructure challenges at ACA, rising to be Chief Information Officer at Sarah Cannon, and then took a left turn not to digital timing, but into digital workflows and clinical trials by joining a partner company of Florence, SignalPath, that Google ultimately acquired about 3 years ago. And now he's the CTO of OneOncology. I'd like to welcome Anthony to make some remarks. The way we're going to run this session is we're going to have about 10 minutes each to hear from the source, from two leaders who've built technology from the ground up in the clinical trial space. And then we're going to do a little couch talk to dive into some of the issues that they brought up in their talk. So Anthony, take it away.
Great, thanks, Ryan, and thanks to all of you for being here. It's been an amazing morning. I kind of want to scrap all the slides and just get right into
it.
Dissecting the first few speakers and a lot of the conversation that you've already had up here today. But let me just give a few minutes on Medidata. So first of all, maybe just a quick show of hands, if you don't mind. How many people in the room have used some Medidata product on at least one study? Okay, great. So I don't think I have a clicker. Am I advancing slides or is someone else doing that?
I don't know how that works. I guess someone else is doing that.
Okay.
You got the next one. There you go.
There we go. So just a quick background on Medidata. We've been around just over 26 years now, and the core EDC system that we offer, which is called Rave, has been sort of our flagship product for all of that time. And I hope that we can get into some of the adoption curve conversations that have been hinted at already this morning. But it took a good 12, 15 years for EDC to really take hold after Medidata and a couple other early EDC companies kicked off that technology. And today it's sort of ubiquitously used across the industry, whether you're using Medidata or one of the many other EDC platforms that are out there. Medidata has about just over 1 million users. 700,000 plus of those are our Rave certified users, but also using, many of our users also use other Medidata technologies. We'll get into a little bit of that in a second. We've done about 36,000 trials globally across every therapeutic area, every phase, and we've covered about 11 million patients across those trials. One of the things we're really proud about is that we do work extensively with sites. Hopefully, many of you already know that, but we have a dedicated site insights team that works with Medidata regularly, partly via our partnership with SCRS, and partly just sites that we have brought into Medidata. We have a patient insights program, we have a site insights program, and we merge those two programs together. Often we run 15 or 20 workshops a year, many of them with both of those groups combined, in order to feed the best insight we can get from all of you, as well as from patients that are on clinical trials or have been on clinical trials before, because we think that that is critical to helping us build the best technology that you can adopt and use in the very complex environments that you're all working in. So if we can go to the next slide. I talked a little bit about the Site Insights program. It's about 3 years old now. The Patient Insights program is about 6 years old. We've brought those together. I talked about the workshops that we run, and I'm gonna be around for a while after the talk today, and I hope that any of you that might be interested in joining our Site Insights group, please come find me. We want that group to be comprehensive and well represented across all different types and sizes of sites in the industry. So please let me know if that's something that interests you. Next slide. So as I mentioned, Rave is probably still the most used EDC platform in our industry, and we've really evolved a lot since developing Rave, although most of our users are at least using Rave and maybe some other Medidata product in addition. Rave continues to be, and I think it's been mentioned a couple times this morning, Rave and EDC are really the lifeblood of this extension or this connection that I think Ryan and his team have been talking about so much today. EDC is the way that a lot of site data, as complex as they may be, end up finding their way into the hands of the pharma company who's doing the evaluation. And it's certainly the mechanism by which data get delivered to regulators. So that continues to be a core focus of what we're doing. But I think what we're gonna get into in this talk, hopefully, is how much the world has changed since we were all thinking about, how do we take paper charts and how do we take paper submissions to the FDA and turn them into electronic submissions. We've just gone so much further beyond that, and I think, as has been stated multiple times, we're accelerating at a much faster rate than ever now. Next slide. So one of the key things that Medidata has tried to do over 26 years is develop a platform that is conducive to doing as many different aspects of clinical trial research work as possible. I know it's been said that the trials have become more complex. I think Dr. Califf did a great job highlighting how odd it is that the technology gets better and better and faster and more able to do things for us than ever before, and yet we're still slowing down in the speed with which we can conduct trials, and we really haven't done much about the 9 out of 10 failure rate that's been mentioned a few times already this morning. So, I think what we hope to do as a company is introduce new innovation, new technology that helps accelerate the answer to these questions, and then to go one step further, which is ultimately to help our pharma customers actually design trials that are geared to be successful at a much higher rate than 1 out of 10. Next slide, and maybe we'll skip this slide. Let me go to just 2 more quick slides here, and I'll hand it over to Andy. Over the last few years, Medidata has kind of rejiggered the way we're organized as a company away from the 35 different products that we offer, and we have built and offer all of you over time to drive you crazy in your day-to-day business. And we are now restructured as a set of 3 experiences, we call them. So we have a patient experience fundamentally focused on all the technology that a patient might hold in their hand during a trial to use either at home wearable sensors, eCOA, eConsent, many of the tools that you all know patients know how to interoperate with themselves. The data experience is RAVE and some of our RBQM technologies and many of the ecosystem technologies that have been mentioned a few times here this morning, where we, as Florence does, recognize that more and more our entire industry needs to operate as a joint ecosystem. And many of the products and capabilities in the data experience are targeted towards being a way for data to have throughput into a single place where you can realistically apply AI modeling or other types of newer technology to learn faster and to iterate faster on the data that you're collecting. And finally, the study experience, which I hope we can really get into in this conversation, is our vision of the future of what you all think of today as CTMS. And CTMS is obviously a critical part of the way we all manage trials, but we view the future of CTMS as much more as a shift left, kind of moving upstream, helping customers learn from all of the failed trials of the past and the successful trials of the past to design better trials and simulate those trials before we start dosing patients. And instead of just managing a trial as it's going, we hope to actually build the right kind of trials that are more geared for success from the start. So that's a quick overview on Medidata, and I'll go one more slide, which I think will be a good handoff to Andy's slides. It's been said over and over, you all live and breathe this every day. Trials are becoming more and more complex. Dr. Califf talked about I think 94% of data was his metric that never got looked at by the FDA. But I can tell you from my very first job out of college at Genentech in 1996, working with SCDM and many of the industry consortiums at the time, we started thinking about how do we collect less data on these trials. And we came up with things like data management plans and statistical plans and ways that we could justify everything in a protocol as really being necessary for the conduct of the study. And all that's happened since then, as we've collected more data, trials have become more complex, and I'll bet that 94% statistic holds pretty true across lots of different disease areas for lots of different regulatory bodies around the world. So, there is something that we need to do differently around changing. If we have to live with the growing and expanding complexity of trials, I think there's something we really have to look at doing differently, managing that complexity and finding a way to not let it slow the conduct of the overall program.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm thrilled to have Anthony's perspective as building the platform that spans both sites and sponsors. And the numbers that you put on the screen are testament to the scale that your business has been able to achieve. But that perspective wouldn't be complete unless we could get the point of view of the same technology from the other side with leaders like Andy. Andy, talk us through a little bit about how you think about managing technology at an important site like OneOncology. And we can go, I think, 3 slides forward to the first of, there we go. Whoop, one too many.
There we go. Let's see. This is
You're going to read every word on this slide, right?
This slide is a little bit of a day in the life of a CTO, but just to step back for a moment to
give us one slide back so we're not freaking out. There we go.
Well, I mean, we really are focused on the same goal, and that is to aggregate data to better answer questions. We're just in different phases of the care treatment cycle. But OneOncology is an MSO, that's a managed services organization. We do not acquire practices, but we partner with practices to ultimately try to bring them scale. And a lot of the thinking there's a lot of community oncology. It's where a majority of cancer patients are treated. And that community oncology continues to face more and more headwinds when it comes to reimbursement and other challenges. So they need partners. And at the end of the day, our health ecosystems needs competitors to lower prices and enable better access. So we partner with practices. We help them with their analytics, which is one of our core slides that we show our physician practices of what we would do for them for an analytics perspective. But we also help them with back office revenue cycle management. We implement Workday and help them with payroll. We do a lot of the blocking and tackling to make a practice far more competitive. This is just for me, when we start to talk about what the technology strategy is for OneOncology, at our core, and most every health system at the core, is to aggregate data. And so we bring in data from our electronic medical record. We're partnered with Flatiron. I assume Flatiron folks are here today. We also work with a number of different genomic vendors: Tempus, Caris, Foundation Medicine's Garden, all feed data into our data warehouse. We obviously do a lot for our different practices, whether it's come from billing analysis. We work with Trillion Health. We ingest into our data warehouse over 5.8 billion claims a year, just to give our practices transparency of, here's what this academic medical center is being reimbursed, here's what you're being reimbursed, here's where we think we can fight for scale on your behalf. We work with SignalPath, but by Verily, we bring in all the clinical trial data that each of our practices are running through our, not an MSO, but an SMO, or site management organization. OneR offers SignalPath and Florence out to all of our customers as part of the relationship with OneR. You can become a headline speaker if you become a customer of Florence, and I'm proof of that. The last one is Zeus Health is an interesting one. Catherine and Dr. Califf were talking or lamenting a little bit about how hard it is to get medical records. OncoMR is a great example where they have deep, robust capabilities in chemotherapy and the clinical care for oncology patients. But a lot of times we struggle getting records from the community. If you're not part of the Epic ecosystem, it's really hard to get data out of referring partners, whether it's primary care providers that refer to you, whether it's surgeons, whether it's urologists. It really is hard to work with academic medical centers because Epic puts a lock a lot of their data. Zeus is another one that we partner with that through regulation like TEFCA will allow us to pull all data from patients, whether it's in an Epic, a Cerner, a Meditech. It's really through Commonwealth and Care Quality are these two large regulatory-backed data aggregators of this data that's allowing data to flow much better. And then lastly, we did an acquisition of Navigating Cancer. It's now called Navigating Care. It is our patient portal that we offer out to all of our practices as part of their membership with OneOncology, and that allows us to pick up patient-reported outcomes and survey data really from a day-to-day basis, not as part of a clinical trial. The only reason I show that is Databricks has been a great partner to us. Databricks is our data warehouse. They did a $1 billion acquisition a couple of years ago of Mosaic AI that now allows us to take all that structured and unstructured data, literally every record of our patients, plus all the ancillary record, and run it through large language models. So we have an interesting partnership with OpenAI that's allowed us to do some things on the abstraction front, allowed us to do some things on clinical trial matching, as well as kind of RCM AI analytics. The next slide. And this is a little bit of our AI strategy, but a major thing that is happening, at least in the majority of physician practices and hospitals, is this whole notion of you're going to go in and see your doctor, and hopefully this happens one day soon for you. But instead of them being on the screen and typing away on the electronic medical record, they're literally going to pull out their smartphone and they're going to hit the record button, and you and them are going to record the visit. I am an advocate of this strategy. I have a 14, 11, and a 9-year-old that I'm always trying to get off the screen. And so I'm always fighting with them to get them off the screen. And the last thing I want to do is go see my doctor and have them be on the screen as well. And so this technology allows them to be totally removed from the screen. I think it's pretty interesting. They record the visit. The AI then summarizes it. If the doctor and the patient talk about, youth sports, that whole bit about youth sports is eliminated from the record, and the whole summary is put there. But you have this kind of human in the loop now that the AI is basically doing all the documentation. The physician is approving it. I think it has interesting implications on 21 CFR Part 11. And the more, if you think about this, voice is going to become the predominant way that I think care gets delivered in our hospitals as opposed to the screen. So I think right now we're obviously recording the visit, but when orders need to happen and medication need to happen, there's no reason for the doctor then to have to turn to the EMR and actually order the meds. They should be able to do all that via voice. So Ideally, in a day, in a future, they won't actually come in and have to put down their smartphone and hit the record button. All the rooms will be equipped with the right recording devices that will allow all these discussions to happen. My father was in the ICU in August. We were struggling with a diagnosis, and we had 4, 5, 6 different specialists visit us on a certain Monday. And each time I was taking feverish notes of like, what did he say? What was he know? And trying to merge up this record of where all these different specialists had come in and said, hey, it might be this, it might be that, it might be this other thing. And all I wanted was really a recorder in the room just to record everything, an AI summary to output from each of those specialists, and then the ability to kind of merge all 3, 4, 5 of those visits and say, hey, AI, what do you think it is? And see if we could take the intelligence of what these unique visits were, what these siloed visits were, but leverage the power of AI to get to kind of one common diagnosis. I'm confident we're going to get there, and I'm confident the health systems are going to push us that way. Next slide. So again, I've spent the past 4 years at OneOncology trying to aggregate data. You've spent at Medidata. I mean, the whole goal is to aggregate data. And then the idea is, well, how do we actually get it to use? And so one of the things that we also offer our practices, which I think is going to become more of this whole co-pilot strategy, is we built out the Chrome extension. Where we originally did this was predominantly for the notion of precision therapy, of getting more and more patients onto precision therapies, which we know have a better benefit in terms of survival and outcomes. And so by taking the data from OncoEMR, taking the data from our genomic providers, we now place a Chrome extension. We authenticate through Smart on Fire, a standard which helps a lot in enabling us to get the appropriate authentication. But now we get messages for different notifications, whether it's a clinical trial notification, whether it's a precision therapy opportunity, whether it's, hey, you may just have an opportunity to test this patient for germline testing. All of those happen within this Chrome extension. Where I kind of see this going is the whole notion of a co-pilot. So while today it's a great area for notifications, it may become the area of how we work with metadata in the future, or how we work with other areas where a robot would come in and actually go execute a task for you. So if you wanted to send data up to a metadata EDC, potentially it could do that. You could be human in the loop. So I'm bullish on the whole concept of co-pilot. I was in San Francisco. I took a Waymo. I assume they're coming to Atlanta if they're not already here. And the first thing that I thought was so cool was, hey, I got into the Waymo. There was no taxi driver, which was nice. I like the smell and I like the music. And I got from actually Databricks headquarters to my hotel. And I was kind of amazed at the whole process of how it happens. But then I sat back and I said, it took Waymo a long time to get here. It probably took them in the 20 to 30 to 40 billions of dollars to get to an unsupervised taxi. And where we are, at least today, as we're trying to get AI more into clinical trial and practice, is I believe that we are in the co-pilot mode. So we're not going to replace humans, but we want to make these humans 50x more efficient. And so a lot of what we're thinking through here with this Chrome extension is not only to deliver better care and better notifications to our clinicians, but then how do we make all these different types of users, whether it's an APP, whether it's a data analyst, whether it's any type of user of the EMR, how do we connect it to the ecosystem and allow them to be co-pilots where they're not necessarily doing the work, but they're orchestrating the work? So we're real bullish about what we're doing there. Yep.
Oh, I was winding you up. Do you have more remarks?
Well, I think there's a couple more slides, but
okay.
I mean, it's all it's all just our tech strategy. We're doing a lot in clinical trial matching. Obviously, AI is kind of the silver bullet that we've been waiting for clinical trial matching. The curating eligibility criteria and doing it at a volume to which you could actually have a site network, and the size of the menu was really challenging. So we're super excited about what we're doing with clinical trial matching. Next slide. And then lastly, this is just kind of the next slide is kind of the framework for which I look at digitization. And so some of our partners, whether it's our analytics stack, whether it's Florence, whether it's Verily, whether it's Flatiron, This is everything that is taken to us to get to digitization. And I could take this to some of our users and I say, look at everything we've done to digitize. And they would still look at me and go, it's incredibly manual. So we're only, a certain part of the way there, but at least with the foundation of the data, hopefully AI and this co-pilot concept can take us a lot farther.
Thanks, Andy. Towards the end of your remarks, you mentioned your goal of making humans 50 times more efficient. I think the three of us share that goal, although we're working with different tool sets in order to get there. Even though we're working with different tool sets, we're working on an operations tool set that spans multiple site networks. You're focused on a particular site network. Anthony, you're focused on the data layer. What's common between the three of us is that we believe in open ecosystems. And so maybe I could start with you, Andy, and then we'll go to Anthony. You could have had a slide there that had one big vendor. It could have been Epic. It could have been any one, a handful of those logos where you would have encouraged them to be the only platform for all the capabilities you wanted to deliver to your end users. Why didn't you do that?
Yeah, I don't want to bash Epic too hard, but the reality is community oncology gets reimbursed about a third of what academic medical centers and nonprofits do. So, and they're typically small businesses. They're typically, if you want to know who's running the billing, it's usually either the husband or the wife of the main physician partner. So they're in a lot of ways mom and pop. We're trying to scale them. Epic, the way that they are going to price out their solutions has basically been cost prohibitive for some of these practices. So you've had folks like Flatiron emerge that can offer a very cost-effective product, but also a high-quality EMR solution that really is niche-driven in terms of solving a lot of the different workflows. And that's 100% where they're going to be focused. To go to a single solution, I think would mean that we would either move slower or that we would not be able to solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve. And, so that unbundling and letting partners do what they do best has at least gotten us where we are today. And I'm hopeful it'll take us where we want to go in the future.
Thanks. Anthony, what's your point of view about where singular platforms are appropriate and versus ecosystems appropriate?
Appropriate's one way to think about it, but I think there's just the reality is that unless you have a government mandated single system, which some countries do, it's not realistic. We're not going to see it. I think especially not in this country. I think the innovation is good. I would love if everybody used Medidata for everything, but the innovation, the competition, the other vendors, they sort of keep everything moving. And there's niche providers, as Andy pointed out. I'm not saying Flatiron's a niche provider, but there's lots of sites that don't want to use Epic. There's lots of sites that don't want to use Rave. There's lots of sites that use kind of self-serve, build it yourself, very simple trial EDC tools at a price point that we would be very challenged to compete at. So I think, the way we've thought about this over the last several years, as the usage of technology becomes more ubiquitous and many more players enter the market all the time. I mean, I would bet the people in this room have seen a 10x explosion, even since COVID, I would guess, on the number of different technologies that are introduced, because every startup that has something cool and can sell one pharma on it, and that pharma does one trial at your site, now that's your technology, and you've got to figure out how to use it, whether it's scalable or not, and whether you're seeing it from any other sponsor or not. But those things are good generally for inspiring better and I would say more fruitful competition to bring everybody forward faster, if you build an ecosystem that allows these tools to interoperate. And my guess is that the frustration for a lot of people in the room here today, and certainly many of the other sites that we work with all the time, is that the way to connect these tools just is the part that's missing. You get a lot of different tools that aren't at scale. You have to run them differently on different trials for different sponsors. And there isn't the interoperability, there isn't the connectivity, there isn't the simple stuff like single sign-on. Like there aren't ways to make these things into an ecosystem so that if you wanted to put the smart kind of AI tools that Andy's mentioning on top, or that we're trying to put on top of Medidata, you can't do it because there isn't an ecosystem at play.
So first connectivity and then intelligence after the connectivity. Although I guess, Andy, you're using Databricks, which is an AI-powered warehouse tool, as your connectivity layer too. So maybe part of the question is, how can other stakeholders in our industry connect up apps that don't have someone like you and your team on staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you do have to have, if you don't go with the single vendor and you have the Epic approach, which has been super successful for them and super successful for a lot of health systems, you still have to come back to kind of this best of core mentality. So, hey, I'm going to anchor on this vendor, I'm going to anchor on this vendor, I'm going to anchor on this vendor. And then because I've only anchored on 3 or 4 vendors, I'm going to specifically work with those vendors to say, this is how I want you to connect, and be really prescriptive on how you want, where their lane is, where it begins and where it ends, and really be forceful on, this is how our vision comes together and this is how we do it. And I kind of did that with that last page of that framework of, like, this is where I need you guys to be successful, and then join the customer advisory boards and really push on them to continue to develop out where you see them, you want them to go as well.
So the horror stories that we know are a site getting onboarding a new study and realizing they have 8 to 10 new platforms that ride along in a stack with this new study. Maybe half of those platforms are part of the ecosystem that the site set up, and half of those platforms are riding along from the sponsor. And here on stage, we have 3 reasonably competent and good-looking individuals, with Anthony, running the largest data platform in life science, with, I think I would say, aspirational, Florence is the leading operational platform for studies in life science. And then we have Andy, who's a very sophisticated site operations executive and IT leader. Why can't we get out of our own way? Why does that still happen? Too many technologies that don't talk to each other. Study timelines are longer than other. What's your theory on why we can't get out of our own way with new technology?
One of the things I'm seeing that evolve, and at least at OneOncology, we unfortunately put that technology use first on revenue cycle. We got to get paid first before we put it towards research. Has this been this whole notion of robotic process automation? It's somewhat of a legacy tech. There's Automation Anywhere, there's UiPath that have done it, but they've done it in a very brittle manner, meaning they can control a mouse that'll come in and click on the screen, and you can tell the robot, hey, go click on pixel 400 by 1200 and hit that submit button. But if for whatever reason we wake up on Monday morning and that submit button got moved to the bottom left corner, like the whole robot breaks. And so now what we're seeing is the emergence of this RPA technology that has
What's that?
Robotic process automation. So we're seeing the emergence of this robot that now has the power of an LLM. So the robot no longer has to be told, go click on this pixel or go click on this form. You can just tell the robot, go find the submit button.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we're doing in the prior authorization space right now is we have these robots that are embedded with LLMs that can actually read the medical record and make decisions on where to go click in the payer portal. So there's so much friction in just getting paid from a community oncology office that we have to go get prior authorization. We have to do that in individual little payer portals. So everyone here at research, I think, always laments the last mile problem and that every protocol is uniquely different. But what we are seeing emerge is this whole co-pilot concept that I was kind of referencing earlier, and the idea that now I have robots that are smart enough to not just click a button and know where to click on the screen, but they actually can read the content and make decisions. Then I think we can start to glue some of these pieces together, even if there are 2, 3, 4, 5 different systems.
I think I get it. So we spend a lot of time, if you go next door, and please do, we have a lot of our partners in the hall next door, and we've spent a lot of energy setting up integrations with those partners in the various Florence applications. And there's some brittleness in how you design the integration. Well, when this button gets clicked, what do you want to have happen? It's got to do that every time. And there's some brittleness in how a site might decide to interact with that, or an end user might decide to interact with that. That could break, or our software could change, or their software could change. And so I think what you're getting at is that one of the reasons we've been in our own way is because software integration's hard and brittle. And you're an optimist with the impact that AI can have, because AI is not hard and brittle, it's flexible and reactive.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll finally help collapse down this stack of finicky applications. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it's, Andy mentioned the last mile, but I would propose that it's a lot more miles than just the last one, right? Because there's a lot of pharma decision making about which vendor.
I'm glad you went there.
Which vendors, and let's switch vendors, and we decided to change our CRO, and our CRO has a whole suite of vendors, and they change their vendors every so often, and so you can sort of build this quagmire of different technologies, and you can have a willingness between vendors, and oftentimes you do, to work together, but then you create this brittle nature of those integrations because they haven't been driven by robots, they've been driven by people who spend a year, probably longer than your trial's gonna run with those two vendors, is the timeline that it took those two vendors to figure out how to do an integration that, even though it's done, is still very brittle.
Yes.
And then we're all innovating as fast as we can, right? So you are breaking the brittle stuff quickly, because Medidata is gonna do, 300 or 400 software releases this year, right? Just all the time across all the different products. We've had for years a set of open APIs, and people just integrate with us without us even knowing it, because we've tried to make that a possibility. But that doesn't mean that things don't break when we make a change. Someone else has to go make a change. You get a change management, a downstream effect from that. So it's complicated. There's a lot of choice, starting with pharma, and then moving on to, I think where we're hopefully going to be headed over the next few years is that with the acceleration of AI, and I think everyone in this room is seeing it, we probably don't have to sell you on how fast things are moving right now, but you aren't gonna get the value of the AI sitting on top of stuff unless the stuff is good. Like, the AI is useless if it isn't sitting on top of high quality, highly integrated, clean data that the AI modeling can learn from to give you an answer that makes sense and that actually helps you. So you have to get to the point where, somewhere in this mess of vendor choice, integrations, robots doing the integrations faster, everybody figuring out how to work better with Epic, and so on and so forth, these things have to come together to create what is sort of the bedrock of what the AI is going to magically do. And the magic's not there if you don't lay the bedrock in the right way first.
One of the ways you and Medidata have been thinking about changing the bedrock is in the 3 product groups, families that you architected your solutions around. You have Patient Cloud, which is different than I think a lot of us who are steeped in clinical operations think about running research. Yes, there was a flare-up of DCTs around the pandemic, but can you tell me a little bit about that part of your equation, about going directly to patients and what that means for this sort of discussion? How does that impact tech that's harder or easier to use, that's integrated, that's open ecosystem versus closed ecosystem? Those sorts of things when you're not talking about a coordinator in front of Rave, but instead a patient in front of an app.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge difference, and I think it's another way that the technology that we all hold in our pockets all the time now has really started to influence our industry, I think in a positive way, is we just can't build anymore the kind of shitty stuff that we've always forced this industry to use. The things that you guys rolled out this morning in these videos is gorgeous. Like, that's beautiful, consumer ready. It's a nice user interface. You have the kind of tools and filters and navigation that you would expect to see on any app that you're going to pull out every day and use. And I think, the mind shift that somebody joked earlier about how we talk about we talk about being patient-centric, but that's sort of the last thing that we are as an industry in a lot of ways. And at Medidata, we decided a long time ago that if you wanted to move closer to the patient as the source of data in their real life, not just a DCT, but any kind of outside of a site visit data capture moment that might happen, and we expect there to be more and more and more of those as time goes on, you have to put technology in front of that patient that looks and feels and creates the kind of engagement from them, maybe not TikTok level engagement, but the kind of engagement that they get from the 100 other apps on their phone that they use every day, all the time. And if you don't create that, if you use a 10-year-old eCOA tool to collect eCOA from a patient, or even more broadly, lots of decentralized trial data from a patient today, you're going to lose engagement. And if you lose engagement, you've lost all the benefit of trying to move outside of a site visit and into kind of the patient's real day-to-day experience, which is where we think the bulk of the learning can really happen about how the drug is working or not working. So, Patient Cloud was an effort to distinguish between the types of technology that would be appropriate site-facing and sponsor-facing, and the types of technology that would be appropriate to be patient-facing. And we put a huge amount of effort into that business in the last 10 years or so.
Awesomely helpful. I have a story to tell, but first I want both of you to think about perverse decision-making either at sites or sponsors and why they're so risk-averse. The story I wanted to riff off of Anthony's is our first large site customer is OneOncology back in 2017, and they were using a green screen technology, like at the airport, mashing the clacky keypads in order to generate documents for study startup. And so in a sense, all we did is we came in with a consumer grade technology that was actually easy to use and see and adopt, and replace this technology from the 1980s that was horrible. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of that perspective still in the new applications that are getting created. Clinical research is so hard, it's so hard to hit the mandate of functionality that we often leave the user experience behind. So I think one of the ways we get in our own way is not putting the right level of polish on things that are either for patients, as you describe, Anthony, or that get put in front of the people doing the work, the coordinators and the investigators and the project managers at sites. And so I hope this audience will continue to hold the three of us at a high standard, because it should be just as delightful to use an app that can enroll a patient as it is using an app to make a dinner reservation. So how do sites and sponsors make perverse decisions, and how can we avoid those to get better technology out in front of end users? You have any experience with perverse decisions, Andy Corts?
Yeah, for sure. The whole EDC paradigm, to me, to a certain extent,
Is this where you kick Anthony in the knee?
This is a kick. This is a kick.
Okay,
But
let's
the
do
whole
it.
paradigm, I mean, at the end of the day, I see Medidata as a research data warehouse. The paradigm of my site, I don't choose metadata. The sponsor does. If I go to the sponsor and say, hey, would you consider X, Y, and Z, or do you want to do something innovative? Most of the times they would say, yes, we do, but not with this molecule. Because nobody wants to take a risk if they have a really successful breakthrough drug on a
Yes.
different technology because it's tried and true.
Correct.
And so really the site doesn't have a lot of decision-making in the whole process. We can try to innovate. We're doing things with EHR to EDC. But at the end of the day, the innovation that we're seeing with some of the cloud data warehouses like Snowflake, Databricks, I mean, I will give an example of last week, Databricks, Snowflake, they have this open standard called Delta sharing, where I can write 10 lines of code and share data between the two platforms. And we had consultants come up that wanted to do some analytics for us. They wanted our data out of it. It was going to take some of my analytics guys a long time to get all these tables ready. And we just said, well, do you accept Delta sharing? And literally overnight, we sent them all the data that they need. I would much rather hire a data engineer at OneOncology than another data analyst to do data entry. And so I just think the more, I think the sponsors aren't going to push innovation because at the end of the day, they want clean data, loaded with integrity, everything that they need to defend themselves at the FDA. But I'd love to see our two organizations figure out a better mechanism to share data. How can we leverage AI to necessarily clean and validate the data? And maybe it's a co-pilot function as well, but I do think the technology organizations have to come forward and do it in such a way that the sponsors will allow it to happen.
That's it. Anthony, I'd love you to comment on that. You know, this topic is, I guess, generally speaking, data liquidity. And where do you see data going into RAVE and coming out of RAVE and new waves in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, we've mentioned Epic a few times, and it's it's fun to kick Epic in the teeth. I mean, right before you kick Medidata in the teeth, you kicked Epic in the teeth. And we do it too. But there's a ton of data in Epic, and what we've done over the last few years, thanks to TEFCA and some of the other mechanisms that you mentioned, and let's not forget some legislation, thanks to some legislation that gives patients control of their own medical record, and they have the right to sort of use it and transport it and make it usable. So there's a patient movement here that I know we probably don't have time to get into, but that I think is really going to change the way we all think about the use of AI. But what Medidata has done, similarly to I think some of the things Andy was talking about, is we've just partnered by moving RAVE into Epic and by using mechanisms like legislation and TEFCA to move EHR data into RAVE. And that makes a huge difference to sites. Sites can be working in Epic. RAVE is just sitting there in the background unbeknownst to them, and with a click of a button, they can populate an entire RAVE CRF out of the data that are in Epic. Does it still have to be source verified based on risk? Yes. Do we still need CRAs? Yes. Is there still going to be some analytics and reporting and hopefully AI that finds the anomalies and runs the edit checks and fix the queries, and all those things still have to happen, but it's getting more streamlined. It's not because we sat down with Epic and said, hey, you guys are doing a lot of stuff, we're doing a lot of stuff, let's partner. It's because there have just been enough other technological advancements and legislation that allow us to just sort of make this stuff happen now and create an ecosystem, maybe a little bit by force, compared to a traditional kind of handshake across the table or whatever. But Epic doesn't want to do those kind of handshakes. And so there's other ways to do it. And I think we're starting to see some of that evolve, in lots of different parts of the industry.
Heck yeah. Let me bring us to a close, because I think with that remark, we had 3 corners of the triangle established. One is, in Florence's little corner of the world, we make an effort to create consumer-grade software that's a delight to use. It's easy to use, and therefore, it's not yet another tool. From your perspective, Anthony, you just articulated so nicely the idea of user empowerment and getting the participants in the study empowered in creating connections and creating data liquidity that allows intelligence to come from that part of the network. So not just sponsors and sites, but consumers and legislation as well. And then Andy, you shared optimism around AI to do the connecting. Once we lay the groundwork of the basic tools, we now have flexible models that don't freak out when we don't have the gazintas and the gazatas set just right. That sound right to you all? I'd love for you all to join me in a round of applause to thank Andy and Anthony.